Hello and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be showcasing my top go-to plugins for mixing and mastering any style of rap music. I've been mixing for a few years now, and I believe every engineer has their own collection of plugins that they use in order to achieve their sound. I'm going to show you my plugin collection that I've been using as of late, and I hope that you can find some inspiration. When I mix, I tend to use multiple instances of the same tool. For example, 2 EQs and 2 compressors. This is how a typical vocal mix bus looks like for me. As you can see, the majority are Waves plugins. Okay, to begin with, I'm going to state and show you each plugin that I use and why I use them. Right, let's get started. So I like to keep things simple, and if you've been watching me for a while, you know that this is the typical structure that I use from even just setting up my FL Studio 20 project, okay? I like to kind of break things up into the lead vocal, the main vocal take, the vocal dubs or stabs, the background vocal, the secondary vocals in a sense, and then you have the ad-libs, okay? So the lead vocal, the vocal dubs or stabs, and the ad-libs all rooted into something I call the vocal bus. And then the beat has its own channel, and then all rooted into the master. The reason why I keep it like this is because it's the most simplest way. If you have so many tracks, then it starts to get jumbled and messy for beginners to understand. Okay, but of course, as you kind of develop your own style of mixing, and this is one thing that I've realized that a lot of people kind of do eventually after the mix, they develop their own styles and they do what works for them. But on this channel, I like to do things that kind of work for everybody and is simple for everybody to understand as well. So this is the typical structure, okay? Now, the majority of my plugins are always on the vocal bus, okay? So if I kind of just read out all the plugins that I tend to use, okay? Now I'm going to kind of break it down into categories on which type of tool or plugin I use for each instance, okay? For example, compressors. These are my go-to compressors. The R compressor from Waves, the CLA76 compressor from Waves, and the Fruito compressor from, which is the stock plugin from FL Studio 20. For an equalizer, I mainly use the FabFilter Pro Q as a static EQ type of thing. A dynamic EQ, I tend to use the F6 dynamic floating point EQ from Waves. For multiband compressor, I tend to use the C4 from Waves as the multiband processor. You can also use the C6 if you have that one there. For reverb, I tend to use the Valhalla Vintage Verb. Delay, I use the Fruity Delay 3. Sometimes I can use the H Delay from Waves. For DSR, I just use the simple Waves DSR from Waves. The limiter, for a limiter, as you guys can see here, I tend to use the L1 limiter. Okay, and other effects, of course, the Ozone Imager 2 and Pancake 2. On the master chain or master bus, I tend to use the SSL bus compressor and then the Ozone 9 elements. Okay, so those are all the plugins I kind of use. Let me kind of show you where they are on the chain as well, because you kind of see they're kind of distributed as well. So on the beat, I tend to leave it empty because it depends on the beat itself. Sometimes you may need to add some things onto the beat, but that really depends on the context of the beat and what's happening with the vocals and whatnot. Okay, so on the vocal bus, I use a compressor first, okay? This compressor, the reason why I use this compressor because it has a nice overall sounding sound, if that makes sense. And you can play, of course, you can do some upward compression and you can do some downward compression, which is fantastic. It's a great thing you can do. You set the threshold, gain, attack and release. Check out the card above to watch a video on how to use compressors and whatnot. But this is my go-to compressor and I think it really sounds smooth all around, right? That's the compressor there. Then I add, I don't tend to add the reverb second like this, but in this instance, because I don't want to kind of create a send, I think it was just easier to show you how this reverb looks like on the chain. Sometimes I may actually put it at the bottom here or whatnot, but the mix value is kind of small in this instance. Okay, so let's just, yeah, that's that. Then I tend to use like a C4 multiband processor or compressor, which actually just processes the vocals and makes it sound smooth and even, which I really like. And the good thing about this is that you can tackle multiple bands. So for example, if you hear that your vocal is sounding weird in one specific certain frequencies area, you can go into that frequency range or band and kind of just, you know, compress it, process it a bit more. It's very good for fine-tuning, in a sense, like a fine-tuned compressor in a sense. Okay, that's that there. And then you can see that, okay, once I compressed it, I kind of, because this first compressor kind of just smooths everything out in a sense. It's applying it to the whole vocal take, not so much in specific frequencies. This C4 is kind of doing it in each frequencies or each parametric band, okay? And this FabFilter Pro Q kind of just roll off, more like a static one as well, in a sense. It just kind of cuts. I mainly just do some cutting here, okay? I don't really tend to do gain in here, tend to do some cutting. I usually cut more than I gain, but this one here is just to kind of cut and just to kind of clean it up based on these ones here. Okay, then the DSR kind of DS the vocals if it's not sounding, if it's sounding too harsh and you can hear too much sibilance. If you can hear too much sibilance, I tend to DS the vocals. Then I tend to add one more compressor to kind of thicken things out, you know. So I add this compressor to kind of thick things out and to kind of smooth things out on a better basis, if that makes sense, and make it sound more lush and more controlled. Also to make it sound like it's actually within the mix, sitting in the mix nicely. So that's what I add there. Then the limiter is to make the vocals actually sound loud. So if we look at this limiter here, just to get it to a specific volume level, so I can actually match it with the beat. Because if I don't do this this is like it's a to kind of control the whole vocals and stuff, to actually control the overall sound after I've done all the processing, which makes sense to why I'll add it last. Okay, that's the vocal bus there in a nutshell. Lead vocals, I just tend to add sometimes either a EQ and compressor on these ones. Here I added the F6, as I spoke about the dynamic floating point. I'd actually add this here to take the lead vocal first, then I route it into the vocal bus, just like this. On the vocal dubs, of course, ozone imager 2, then a compressor of somewhat. Okay, because this is not the lead vocal, I tend to like to use the Fruity compressor for things that you're not going to be hearing too much, if that makes sense. Okay, then the ad-libs, of course, I spoke about that already. EQ, compression, delay, pancake 2. Check out the card above for the ad-libs preset pack. So that's essentially all the plugins I kind of use on my top plugin basis. And I think if you kind of see, if you've been watching me for a while, you kind of understand that, hey, yeah, I see, Cole, I see you using these plugins on a regular basis. I see you use this, that. Okay. Of course, these plugins are from Waves and they are premium paid plugins. So I do believe that Waves have some great plugins out there. Also, you can also get some other plugins from like SSL, Slate Digital, and whatnot. Initially, I started off with more Slate Digital plugins, but then I kind of branched out into more of the Waves. I just got one of the Waves bundles, and I feel like if you just purchase a Wave bundle, I think the time you actually do something like that, you know, okay, my mixing is becoming serious because I actually invested in some plugins, good plugins as well. And also, there's a reason why a lot of professional engineers don't always use stock plugins, is because the paid plugins and premium plugins is what's going to give you that professional sound. So you kind of need to invest money in to actually get a nice sound. But also remember that a large chunk of mixing or just getting nice quality sounds is from the recording process as well. So if you can heavily invest in your recording process and then after invest into your actual mixing process, so the post-processing process, if that makes sense. Okay, so on the master as well, I had the SSL bus compressor to kind of process the whole the master, and then I add ozone 9 elements or ozone 8 elements or whatever thing I have here. So in this instance, I just use ozone 9 elements. I think it works fantastically fine. I don't overdo it. I don't overkill it with the plugins that I add on my master chain. Just usually tend to use a few. And sometimes, yeah, and this ozone 9 elements kind of has, you know, you kind of see EQ, imager, and maximizer, and limiter, EQ, and that's about it. Okay, I compress it above, then I do this thing here. So that's the way I tend to keep things simple and smooth in a sense, and you guys can kind of hear that. Okay, so without further ado, that's the end of this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please leave a like, comment, and thumbs up, and subscribe for more content just like this, and comment down below what you want to see next. Okay, thank you for watching. Goodbye.